What do you get when you have an unforgettable musical masterpiece performed live on stage with a swelling symphony, a choir of 150 voices, and dozens of mesmerizing dancers? Goosebumps.
Earth and Sky.
This is Joel Block. Global population grew in the year 2007 to 6.6 billion. We often hear the number 9 billion to describe Earth's population in the year 2050.
Oh, okay.
Is this good?
This is good.
This is okay?
You bet.
Cassette-wise, we never found a stronger machine than the Marantz.
Right.
These are just battleships. You know how I love those battleships.
Yeah.
And they're good things. So I keep one of those. I don't need, there's not much going on in cassette world these days, so there's not much to do. Honey and I both love this digital hybrid. When I'm doing phone patch sessions, oftentimes there'll be a producer in another city and they'll want to talk to the talent in the booth. And so this is a digital hybrid which just kind of makes sense of the incoming phone audio. It cleans up the audio,
wow.
makes it good. This is just the headphone amp that we use in the system. An old DAT machine which hardly ever gets used anymore. We do ISDN phone calls here. ISDN circuitry allows us to link one studio to another studio, and this is used almost every week in ISDN world. A Tascam CD recorder, CD burner and player, and I've got 3 DBX mic pre's. These are just channel strips which are mic pre's, compressors, and de-esser combinations. They've been real reliable. I've had all these 3 since 2010, and they're tube-based. I've never had to replace a tube in any of them. Knock on a little bit of wood.
Good sound. I mean,
Good sound, nice sound, yeah, nice clean. The mics we use, during the old production block days, we probably used 95% of the time we were probably using Audio-Technica 4050s, which is the tube-based, or 4033s, which is the non-tube based. And we had some Neumanns and all the AKGs and 414s, things like that. But our workhorse was the Audio-Technica back in those days. Here at the Blockhouse, I've learned to just love the Neumann TLM 103. That mic has a really low noise floor, which just really keeps things nice and clean, and it just works for a whole lot of different voices. It's just marvelous sounding microphone. So we use I still use 4050. One client, one audiobook reader who comes in and rents the studio, she insists on the 4050, and she places it over her head like this high up with a windscreen on it. No screen, but I'm sorry, just a sock on it, over her head, and she'll sit in the chair, and her copy will be there, her book will be there, and she's just flailing about down here, you know, just doing her audiobook. She does lots of them, and that microphone's just sitting way up high, but she gets the best sounding recording. I don't know why it works so well, but just a little Allen and Heath Mix Wizard, which I just love. They're just little workhorses. Things on all the time. I have done complete jingles on this machine. I'll just feed it straight into Pro Tools.
okay.
But I mean it. It sounds so good. It's hardly ever used this room.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are all sound effects down low, music up high,
Oh, right.
all separated by genre. Now we pull more off the internet these days than we do from the CDs.
Really?
But
Yeah.
I still have clients who like to come in and just see the libraries.
That's
and
great.
just listen, put on a pair of headphones, and just pick music.
This is expecting rain again. It's slipping. I'm going to get it to stop slipping. I'm Martin Theophilus for the Museum of Magnetic Sound Recording, and we're at the production block, now called
The Blockhouse.
the Blockhouse, and we're with Joel Block, and we want to find out more about his travels in electronic audio recording. So Joel, where did it all start?
Martin, I think it probably came from my hanging out in the radio station where my father worked in New York. Back in the 50s, he was working at WNEW. In the 40s and 50s, WNEW New York. And I just loved to go in there and watch what they would create. He would run his own turntables. He would drive the turntables himself, but he had a team of engineers in another room, and we would sit in another room, and guests would come in, and they would be mic'd certain ways. So I kind of came from that studio radio station background.
Do you remember any of the equipment back then that they were using, tape-wise, or?
I do know that my dad was, for a time, was the spokesman for Ampex tapes, machines, recorders.
Yeah.
He was considered to be the first of the disc jockeys. He even helped in the naming of the term disc jockey. I used to hear that he created that term disc jockey, but then I recently heard that Walter Winchell created the term disc jockey, but he was basing it on his knowing of my dad, whose name is Martin Block, who did a little show called the Make Believe Ballroom on WNEW. It was make believe. It was pretending that Perry Como might be in there with him, and Perry Como could show up. They did become friends. Frank Sinatra, and he had a revolving ballrooms, or revolving stages in this make-believe ballroom, and he would set the stage and then play the music of Harry James or Perry Como or Frank Sinatra, people like that. And the show was very successful. It was very successful for a long time. In fact, he then moved us all to California and started doing it for the ABC network.
Whereabouts?
In Encino. We lived in Encino, and he had a home studio there, which may be where my home studio came from, the whole thing.
He would be impressed.
The comfort of it, yeah. But it came from that love of initially radio stations.
Just one other question about that. How long was he doing that? When did he start?
My dad sold razor blades in Texas, among many other things. He was just a born salesman.
Wow.
But I remember hearing that he was selling razor blades down around the Texas-Mexico border. What a start.
Yeah.
and
thinking about splicing later.
I guess so. And then he moved to New York and had an interview with the program director there around the time of the Bruno Hauptmann trials. And so they sent him down to downstate New Jersey to cover the trials, which he did. The only place he could set up was in the men's room there, because there were a lot of reporters. This was huge news, the Lindbergh kidnapping, and consequentially the Hauptmann trials. And so he set up shop in the men's room at the courthouse and started doing, via telephone connection, started doing this ballroom thing, this make-believe ballroom. Just in between the court news, he would play music, and he would talk and just keep the patter going.
Right.
And that's where he started. That was well received.
Yeah.
And then they offered him a radio show to not be the Gary Owens type of announcer, but to be the gentle, soft-spoken announcer that he was.
Yeah.
He had specially designed microphones that worked for him. I don't know what brand they were,
Right.
but he loved to just caress that microphone would be right here, that close to his mouth, and he worked it very well.
Well, that's cool. That's
I can still watch him because he's on YouTube. If you Google Martin Block,
Okay.
B-L-O-C-K,
Right.
you'll find some of his early television.
I'll do that.
They were like little early MTVs. They're very interesting, kind of fun to watch.
To do that. Right.
And that's where it all started. How it started here in Austin was I came here with the Air Force.
Oh, okay.
Arrived here around 1969. And I just had another year to serve in the Air Force, and then I'd be done. My obligation would be done. But during that time, I met some people who were setting up a radio station here called KRMH. Did you ever hear of Karma? Remember Karma?
Really vaguely. I didn't get here till 78, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, Karma was a progressive radio station that, almost a free-form radio station. And it just worked so beautifully in that we would have a format for the station, but the format was very loose. If you followed the basic pie diagram, and you stayed within those boundaries, you could just play what you wanted to play.
Wow.
In other words, you couldn't play screaming electric anything at 7 in the morning.
Right.
But you could blend things nicely, and it was just a logical format, and it was very well received. KRMH was around for a long time. So I did that while I was still in the Air Force, and during that time, I found that I really enjoyed creating the commercials that went with radio programming. We always had commercials to do, and I just loved working at their little facility down on 11th Street. And creating just theater of the mind. It was just fun to do that kind of stuff.
So you were basically a DJ, or were you doing?
I was a DJ there for, yes, but that wasn't my love. I was 9 to noon.
Right.
But my real love was getting in that studio and creating and sound effects and music and working with, what we had at the time, which wasn't much as far as available music that we could use to make commercials.
Right. You were still using tape, I would presume?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember what they had at that time?
Well, I'm sure you mean tape-wise?
Yeah.
Yeah, we would record to Scully's. We had Scully machines, Scully 2-track, 1/4-inch 2-track for mastering. We didn't have multi-track anything, not anything, but some fairly decent radio station type microphones, Scully 2-tracks, Ampex 1/4-inch tape, and we did a lot of interviews. We brought a lot of acts in, Bob Seger and John Denver and people like that we would bring, Peter, Paul and Mary, people like that. And not Peter, Paul and Mary, Peter Yarrow. We brought in Peter Yarrow. He came in on his own. Right. But that was my love. My love was just doing the commercials more than anything else.
So then you were in the Air Force. Did you do any radio stuff in the Air Force?
In the Air Force I did. I was stationed in such hot, beautiful spots as Wichita Falls and Thule, Greenland, 700 miles south of the North Pole. And when you go to Thule, you're there to replace somebody. You are there because they're going home. And there's a radio station there, AM, FM, there's a television station there. And you can be as creative as you want for the year that you're there. And I just loved it. I had more fun there because not only would we be the first people to meet the girls coming in from Greenland, or not from Greenland, from Denmark, because Denmark owned Greenland and was running the base. Well, Denmark was running the base. I don't know about owning Greenland, but they were running that Air Force base, and so they would send over USO people, and we'd meet them first as people doing television. So I did a little TV show there, and I did a little radio show there. I just had a ball. And when we weren't working, we were exploring the ice caves, and we'd get out on the ice cap, and it was quite an experience. It was a lot of fun.
Did you choose to come to Austin with the Air Force?
Well, after Greenland, I had orders to go to Fort Hood. I was in the Air Force, but they wanted to send me to an Army detachment at Fort Hood in Killeen, and I refused the assignment. And luckily, I found somebody with a sense of humor, because I just walked up to this captain and said, if you throw people in jail for not accepting an assignment, here are my hands, cuff me, because I don't want to go there. I joined the Air Force, not the Army. And he had a sense of humor. He got a kick out of it. And he said, well, you've just been to Thule, and Wichita Falls. You've paid your dues. So he reassigned me to Austin for the last year, and that's where I met the radio station people, and that's where things really began. I had the joy of meeting my friend Pedro Gutierrez. You must know Pedro.
I know Pedro.
Pedro was running the studio on North Lamar,
Right.
and I was working with dear people, just wonderful people like Travis and Sue Freilich, who had an ad agency in town, and we started working together. We had met down at the radio station in the production rooms, and the guys from GSD&M were all just beginning their work. I was working with Tim McClure and Frank Filch and Roy Spence and Steve Gurasich, the people who later, put it all together in time. We all started out together, and we all started out working together down at that little radio station. And when I left the station, I decided to build a little tiny home studio, and I have a photograph of the little home studio if you want
Yes, that'd be cool.
to see it.
Yes.
But that's where it all began, and I was just committed to doing the kind of stuff that Pedro was doing, just assembling commercials, just having fun with play acting and just seeing what we could do as far as the creation of commercials, and we just enjoyed it.
What equipment did you have in your home studio?
Oh, that was comical. My very first home studio, a friend of mine built a little wooden holder, desk-like arrangement for my two little Sony 6 or 8 channels, 8x2 board. I had two of them snaked together, and there was not a lick of equalization on either one of them. There was nothing.
Right.
But they worked. They worked if you could just, deal with what you had. and I just had an old Sony, I don't remember, Sony mic, and I don't even remember one of the old radio station mics maybe that I had borrowed from them or was using, because my mics, I just had two mics at the time, and they were just awful, awful. But they worked,
Right. So you were taping?
I was taping, yes. That first studio. Oh, and I also had two turntables in it because I would jostle back and forth between the turntables. It was crazy. I just don't know how it worked, but it did. It did. But then when I started taking it more seriously and moving the studio into commercial locations, we started noticing that we couldn't afford really nice stuff, the stuff that the bigger studios were using, the big MCI JH24s and the MCI consoles and things like that. But what I could afford was Tascam.
Right.
Tascam I found to be battleships in that they just worked and worked and worked. They never, ever disappointed. They just kept going. And yeah, they didn't have the frequency response and all the other stuff that some of the bigger Studers and that kind had. But they were good. They were good.
Did you have TX in your home studio when you started this?
No, not at first. Not at first. I discovered the joy of Tascam, TX Tascam, when I first moved the studio around 1972. Moved it out to Timberline Office Park from my home because we were doing a lot of session work.
Right.
Between Pedro and me, we were the only games in town, and so everybody, and there weren't that many everybody's, but everybody who was in the business at the time was coming to us because we could give more than the radio stations could give. We realized that we could do more musically, we could get better sound effects, and so they would come to me.
I'm going to get your assistant engineer here just for a second.
Oh, honey, where's that squirrel? Where's that squirrel, honey? Honey is, as I said, about 16 years old. She's a rescue pup, and she has a lot to say. She's a very happy dog. She sits in here with me in any session that I do. But
Yeah.
life is good if you're honey.
Yeah. We had an interesting thing. Pedro actually called us and said, Bill Harwell says that I need to donate my board to y'all.
Well, his board is classic. It is part of Austin's history.
Yes, David Howe says that too. He said There's no labels on it.
Nothing. You better know what does what, because there's nothing on the board that's going to tell you.
Right. So you worked on it too.
Well, I didn't engineer. Pedro did all of his own engineering, but I was so fortunate to be able to do voice work for a lot of people then, and that continued over the years. And
so you would do the recording, like even in your home studio, would you produce it on something and then send it to the radio station, or were you in a live feed?
No, we were generally working for ad agencies in the early days, and still today I still work for ad agencies. But we'd create the product. And now, of course, MP3s and WAV files make things so nice to send. But we'd create the product and then just send it to the ad agency. Now, usually it would be a delivery to them.
Right.
They would have, after they approved a master, we would do the duplication of it, reel to reel, always reel to reel, and just, you know, a delivery service would take it over to them. Delivery services, really, I mean, they were, you had to have 2 or 3 of them at the time, because they were doing very important stuff for your survival.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. What was the duplicate equipment? Do you remember testing yours?
Sure, I do, because our duplication equipment was generally recorders. We did everything with Tascams oftentimes.
Okay.
We had some other equipment, sometimes Otari. Had an Otari multi-track, but duplication-wise, we'd always dub from one reel to another.
Okay.
And just coming straight off the master, going straight to the dubs. And you mentioned Bill Harwell a while ago. Bill came into my life, I guess, in the mid-'70s, and I was just so busy working out at Timberline Office Park when I was just, you know, pulling my hair out because I couldn't get through the day. We had so much going on. And just kind of went to work. He had the same passion for commercial work. We both loved commercial sessions, because commercial sessions might start at 9 in the morning and go till 11 or 12 or 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Who cares? But it was a one-day thing. It started, you could see the end, and that was nice. You know, I have never really been into recording music because I found that music sessions would kind of drag on.
4 in the morning?
Yeah, and that just wasn't us. And we just didn't for a while, some of the people who worked at the production block, including myself, thought maybe music is a good idea. Maybe we had graduated to the point that music would be good. And so we tried it. We got a big old honkin' Otari Series 54 board. Big old console that's still here in Austin over at the Sound Lab. For a while we did that. Some of our interns, including Chris Erlon, I don't know if you know Chris, who owns Digital Domain, but Chris was an intern at our place, and he one evening was doing a music session there, and one of the people in the band, I don't know what kind of band it was, I didn't pay much attention to the music going on there, but one guy pulled out a pistol and fired it at the ceiling to make a point that he was really angry about something that happened. And when I saw that hole not even the next day, that night, because I got called, because Chris was very upset, I decided that's not what we should be doing. Music is not what we're intended to do. Yeah. So we just honed in on voice. And voice included commercials, corporate industrial presentations, we've always done those, talent demos, we do voice talent demos, not singing demos, but we would do jingles, we did occasional jingles.
Right. And this was at 501?
In the 906 East 5th building. And now, we did set up a studio in the 501 building. I worked with my brother Michael, and Michael is passionate about music recording. And so for a while, Michael and I worked together in that. And, you know, family can have a tough time working together. And that didn't work well for too long. It worked well for a while. But then Michael, you know, we just kind of split it, and he did what he wanted to do, which was music. And he stayed in the 501 building,
Really? Wow.
and really geared up in a big way. Even today, he's very much into esoteric studio gear. He buys and sells it.
We just interviewed Ray Benson, and we interviewed him in Studio B, and he mentioned that some of, I guess, Michael's stuff.
Michael is setting up shop again as of this recording date. He's almost finished setting up the new studio, which is going to be called Studio B, and is in Ray Benson's facility. And Michael just loves to do music.
Yeah.
You know, he just loves it, and he's very good at it. Michael would come in and say, "Listen to the drums on this thing," and I'd listen. I'd say, "Yeah, those are drums." I couldn't hear what he. My ear is not for great drum recording. God bless the musicians, but oftentimes the checks would bounce. So we weren't thrilled with that, and it just, I just thought, let's just deal with our strengths. Our strengths were advertising agencies. If we were fighting the music wars, we would be competing to earn $50 an hour, where with an ad agency, you could charge whatever you wanted. And the going rate around the country seemed to be $150 an hour.
Right.
And so we kind of latched on. Well, I didn't start out there, but started out, doubling what I would have earned doing music, and then eventually worked up to about $150 an hour as a target.
At the same location, or did you?
Well, in the Timberline Office Park location, we were probably at about $110 to $115 an hour. Mm-hmm. When we moved it from there, we moved from Timberline because, to our horror, the rent went to about $325 a month.
Yeah, today that doesn't sound bad.
Doesn't sound bad, does it? But it was real bad back then.
Right.
So we decided to move, and we moved it down to 22nd and Rio Grande. And how we survived that, I have no clue.
Right.
Because we had a total of 2 parking places for clients, and people would come into the parking lot. It was at a residential location, an apartment complex for students on the UT campus. It was owned by my friend Rick Harden, who was a dear friend, and he built a nice little facility for us, but unfortunately it was in his commercial property, which was residential, and clients would come in and just pull into the parking lot, even though we had signage all over, don't park in any place but the production block parking places, and they would, and they'd be towed off. And there wasn't a week went by in the years we were there that we weren't bailing somebody out of a tow-away zone on a first-name basis with the people driving the tow trucks.
That's not good.
It's not good. It's not good.
That's fine. You said GSD&M, some of the beginning people there. Who else was significant to you that really or were interesting or unusual, or that you can tell or not tell stories?
Well, GSD&M was very, very critical to us,
right.
to Bill and I, when we were doing it, because not only were they doing, like, what was it, Jack's beer or whatever the San Antonio beer is, Pearl beer, but we would do all their duplication. So in my little studio out at Timberline, we had 3 Tascam decks. I remember them well. We had a Tascam 7300 2-track, which was our mastering machine, and 2 Tascam 6100 stacked on top of each other, or not. I'm not sure. I don't remember that. Maybe they weren't stacked, but we would dub to those 2 machines, and they might call in an order of 300 to 350 dubs in an afternoon and need them the next day. Wow. So between Bill and I, we would just work all night trying to get that done.
Right.
And
no high speed.
No high speed. Everything was in real time. Yeah. Everything was. I didn't do that. The only time we ever messed with real, true duplicators was one year we bought a Telex cassette duplication system, which none of us liked. We desperately did not like that system. Yeah. In all respect to Telex, who does nice things, I'm sure, that system didn't work for us. We would just as soon do things in real time on real cassette decks. We just thought it sounded better in the long run.
How long did reel-to-reel last for you? When did you go away from it? Did you go to like a Lesis or anything like that, or did you stay with?
We did Tascam D88s. I guess in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Went to DA88s, and were there for many years, but boy, were those finicky machines. This is my first time dealing with Tascam where I couldn't stand their product. I just didn't like it. They just didn't seem to work well. They were finicky, and there was always a DA88 going down, it seemed like. It's just like, I felt that.
Unusual compared to their other machines.
Yeah, because I'm sure they're just so much more involved electronically that they would go down. But I like battleships in my life. I like things to work. But you had asked who some of the fun people were. As I mentioned earlier, Sue and Travis Freilich were dear friends who always brought wonderful products to us to create commercials. The Crown shops and safe driving campaigns and that would go on. And the GSD&M people were wonderful. There weren't too many agencies really back then. There weren't too many. But we also dealt a lot in the early days with Region 13 Education Service Center. The people there, when they discovered that we could do recording and create audio versions of what they were doing out there, they made us real busy. They really did. And that was when my little brother and I were working together. That was kind of almost before Bill Harwell came onto the scene. And we worked together for a number of years. And in work, we had so much editing to do, so much that we had to do that with our little Tascam decks. We had to figure out a way to punch in. Punch-in editing became important. We didn't want to be splicing tape all day long to create their product. So my baby brother Michael and I, we kind of created this Yaha way of punching in that there was no splicing involved. You'd hear the old product and then you'd flick a switch and hit record and keep on going. And usually you'd get a pretty good edit. Well, that enabled us to really turn out these products for them because they had product after product that they needed put out there. And we could do it. And they always wanted cassettes as their final medium. I believe that's what they wanted. Wow. And so we did that for many years for them. Moved, as I said, moved then to Rio Grande. Don't know how we survived that, but we were there for probably close to a decade, maybe. And moved over to the Richard Kouris complex over on East 5th, the 906 East 5th, which was a warehouse that we converted into 3 studios. And that's really where the studio had most of its growth. I was there for about 18 years.
Yeah, I think that's where I probably met you first.
Yeah.
It's been a long time ago. But
yeah, that's where most of the growth came from, was during those 18 years. 3 studios, and we could keep most of them running all day long. We worked with wonderful engineers. Everett Caldwell, our dear friend who passed away a number of years ago, was a great engineer. Patterson Barrett was a dear friend. Chris Erlon and Steve Metz came to work with us. Phil Mazzetti, just good people who are still in the business and still going strong. Bill Harwell now works with Steve and with Phil over at the Sound Lab, and so we're really kind of a family. We do sessions at each other's places, and we help each other when the ISDN goes crazy.
help me.
Yeah, help me.
That's amazing. So many of the people are still working at it.
Yeah.
So 18 years, you said.
Yeah.
There. Wow.
After those 18 years, there was another renter over there in the Kouris properties, a guy named Shannon Carter, who owned a company called the Cardis Group. And Shannon and I became friends, and we decided, we'd like to have our own building. It just seemed to make more sense. And so we started looking, and we found a really nice building at about 30th and North Lamar. It was a strange little building up on stilts, but it was a good configuration for us. And it had an elevator right to the top floor, which is what we occupied. And Shannon's business was an advertising and public relations firm, and they had the lower floor. And the building was good for us. We bought that building, and that was those were happy times. We were there for about 10 years. We bought the building at a good time. It didn't cost that much, especially compared to today's prices. Yeah.
What was it?
But we sold, some guys, some whacked out guys came to us and just said, we've got to buy this building. We must have this building. And we kept saying, no, this is where our businesses are. Oh, we love it. It's the perfect location. And they just kept pushing us. And so we finally sold it to them. And as it turned out, that was just before the whole market collapsed.
Oh.
So we were great. We sold well,
Right.
at a really good time. And then just started leasing, and we leased, and we were there in that building for maybe a decade.
Oh, after you sold it, you stayed.
We stayed there for a number of years, and then at the end of 2010, Bill and I, the rent was going to go up, and I couldn't blame the people who had purchased the building from the whacked out guys who had bought it originally,
Right.
because I had. As a person who had owned that building earlier, I realized, that the amounts just don't stay the same. They have to go up to satisfy the banknotes, and so we realized we got to get out of here because the rent was going up again by $800 or $900, and we just made the decision then that we've run a good course, we've had fun, we've done this for 35 years. That's enough, and we'll just all move it to where we'll do what we want to do. And I decided to just do this room that this studio is in was a bedroom and was beautifully converted by two wonderful studio-oriented converter people. One of whom is Jimmy Gilbert, who always built all of our furniture. Do you know Jim Gilbert?
No.
Well, in probably any studio, many of the studios you've been in, Martin, Jim Gilbert probably did the furniture for it. He is an Austinite who has built furniture for radio stations, television stations, all over the country. When I knew I was going to build at home, we had done that room behind me, which is a fairly small room, and I realized in time that wasn't going to be enough if I wanted to take this seriously at home. So I called Jimmy and said, who do you know that could build a room in a room? And Jim said, well, I bet I could. And he built the most sensational room. This is the room behind you. 2 people can sit in there, 3 people can sit in there comfortably. It is in the garage, so it has low ceilings because the garage door has to pass over it.
Oh, right.
But he built that room so solidly that I do a lot of feeds, NPR type feeds for their programs, and those feeds might go on for an hour, ISDN feeds, and I can trust that room's going to be silent for that full hour.
Wow.
Even if Honey barks out here, if Honey barks.
You don't hear anything. That's cool.
Yeah, it's so solid, and he even ran air conditioning into it, and with the air conditioner and everything, I know I can get through an hour-long recording with no problem,
Yeah.
which is good. Jim Gilbert Design, he's the best.
When did you move to ISDN to start sitting out?
We had done ISDN over at the old production block, and we had it for a long time.
Okay.
ISDN is just wonderfully reliable once you get it set up. Trying to get it set up is the bear.
Right.
As my friends at the Sound Lab, we've noticed, because we've had to set it up a few different times as we've moved facilities, it just seems like nobody at any of the phone companies knows ISDN or appreciates it or can get you through a setup. But once you've fought that long battle and got it set up, it's pretty good. It's pretty darn good. It's quite reliable. Yeah, we like it. I remember back in the old production block days when we were over in the 906 building, this is going back to dubbing. For a while we were part of that digital generation, DGS, digital dubbing. Did you ever hear about that? Yeah, it was the coming thing, and we joined in on it early, became members of it, and you could send a 60-second radio spot in as little as 1 hour. And pay a dear price for it.
Yeah,
and you could send it to DGS, and then DGS would transmit out to radio stations that you'd send them a list of radio stations that would get. But that's where it started, and that was way before MP3s or WAV files came along.
Yeah. When did you let go of your tape machines, do you think? Do you recall?
I don't know, but I saw a picture of your Tascam 8-track, I guess a half-inch 8-track,
Right.
the floor model. We had a 4-track version of that machine
Oh,
when we were out at Timberline. I adored that machine. I loved it. I would pay you most any price to get your 8-track version of it, right? Just, not that I intend to use it.
Right.
I would just love to have it. There was something about that machine that I thought was pretty, and mine was in a rosewood cabinet, fake rosewood, of course. I guess a half-inch 4-track.
yeah.
And oh boy, did I love that. We did jingles. Bobby Bridger and I did many little low-cost jingles on that with 4 tracks, you
Yeah.
know, in the old days.
That machine is more rock solid than the later 88.
Yeah. Well, you had asked me earlier when did we leave tape, and at the old production block when we were in the 906 complex, 906 East 5th, we had slowly been converting over to early Pro Tools. We had all, you know, pretty well gotten. I was one of the last holdouts. I just thought this may not stick, so I better stay with my tape. And I did a session with GSD&M one day, and they came out and we had recorded Ann Richards, and the session ended, and I was editing it all together, and I was splicing the tape. And 2 of the producers, the young whippersnapper producers from GSD&M, were sitting in the couch, and they were visiting, and I was slice. And one of them looks over at me and gets up and walks over and looks over my shoulder and said, "Are you actually cutting the tape?" And I said to myself, okay, it's time for me to make the conversion. It's time to go to Pro Tools completely.
Right.
Stop with the cutting the tape. And so, you know, I don't know what the year was that happened, but I remember the event. And it clearly said to me, time to move on, Joel. And I got to tell you, I just, to this day, I adore Pro Tools. I just adore it.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for so long, you would think I'd get tired of it, but I just can't get enough of it. It is so friendly, it is so powerful. I do lots of audiobooks here. I came to, I don't know where they found out about me, but I got real comfortable doing audiobooks. And last year, 2 people moved here from New York City, both of whom were audiobook readers, serious audiobook readers. And they brought so much work with them that for a time I was juggling 3 and 4 audiobooks at the same time, and that was too much. You know, I'm in my retirement years, and so I want to take it a little easier, but I couldn't take it easy at all with that workload. So I kind of backed off on audiobooks and just decided let's simplify just a little bit. So I'm doing an occasional audiobook now.
It's pretty time intensive.
Oh,
yeah.
terribly. Any audiobook. You know, a book is usually 200 to 300 pages. An audiobook might take 7 to 10 3 to 4 hour sessions.
Wow.
And that's just for the recording. Then I have to edit it all down to something and make sense out of it. Luckily, in Pro Tools really makes it easy. We do punch-ins all the way on anything I do. But I have to clean up the punch-ins oftentimes and add music, add little chapter end sounds. If it's going to audible.com, then they have their own requirements for how much dead space there has to be before and after each segment. And so it's a big project. It's always a big project to do an audiobook. But so I'm just doing them occasionally now. Yeah. And doing commercials and doing talent demos. I do a lot of talent demos for people, yeah. I like to do them. We have quite a sound effects library. We have quite a music library. Legal music. We've always used nothing but legal music. Right. And I'm going to put in a plug for my friends at Omni Music in Port Washington, New York, because for decades they have just been so wonderful. The folks up there, and back when times were tough, they were lenient and forgiving, and so between Omni Music and our friends at American Music Company, we just use legal music, ASCAP BMI approved music.
Have you always been Apple-based?
Always.
Yeah.
I just love their products.
Yeah.
I mean, I hated PCs early on. Early on. Apple products just work,
Yeah.
you know?
So you did Stardate, which I grew up in Alpine in McDonald Observatory, and you must have heard a lot about the stars.
I heard a lot about the stars, and one day, I guess it was around it was very early in our careers out there, out at Timberline Office Park. It was, mid-70s. Deborah Bird was her name, and Deborah had an idea for a radio show and rode her bicycle out to Timberline Office Park, which was a long ride, I'm going to tell you. And I wanted to just talk about it and look at the facility and talk about her idea. They had been doing an answering machine called Have You Seen the Stars Tonight? They had been just programming an answering machine at UT. She worked for UT. Okay, down you go.
All right.
She had worked there for some time and wanted to talk about, taking this show, making it a little bit bigger, kind of going for it. And so I said, well, do you have a host in mind? And she said, no. I said, well, do you mind if I audition for it? May I give it a try? And so I did, and she listened, and I guess she liked what she heard, because we proceeded to work together from about 1975, 76 to 1989 or 90.
Wow.
Is about when we stopped doing Stardate. And then a short time thereafter, we started talking again, because we'd worked together for so many years at this point that we just decided, we did that once, we can do it again. So we created Earth and Sky, because Deborah wanted to take it a little more, to become a little more Earth-centric, and still include night sky information, but not make that the total show.
Right.
Let's talk about our planet, our home planet, a little bit more. And that's what we did. And that show started in '91, and I was associated with it until, I guess, around 2007 or 8.
So do you do a lot of your own voiceover then, or do you bring in more?
I do. I don't really hold out as a character talent, voice talent, but I am with an agent here in town, DB Talent. Deborah Duckett Wood has been very instrumental in any success I've achieved over the years, and as a talent agent, she's just been marvelous and a good friend.
Okay.
And I've been more of an industrial voice. I love doing industrials.
Okay. Right.
I kind of have a good feel for doing industrial voiceover, connect A to B and splice here and that kind of stuff. Lainey comes here almost every day of the week, and
Wow.
she'll work with her voice. She's a talent coach, a voice talent coach, and she'll teach any. You may want to be an animation voiceover person, an industrial voiceover person, a commercial voiceover person. No matter what it is, she teaches it one-on-one here at this studio. But Lainey's been a big part of the studio over the years.
I'm home.
Hey, babe.
You're home early.
Yep, carpooled. Rode right up the HOV lane.
Wow, you made dinner.
What do you think?
Oh, well, I love casserole.
It's not a casserole.
I meant stew.
Stew.
Pie?
As the train crossed the border, I was on the last leg of my pilgrimage to the great monument of Hagia Sophia, in possession of the spear of Vissarion, and alone.
Even now, in the twilight of the culture's venerable existence, the dwarfs fight a constant struggle for survival, refusing to accept defeat until every promise of vengeance is repaid in full.